American. So that's usually how we move this process forward.
I'm sorry. Karine, is it your contention, Karine?
I'm not taking call.
That the question
Jackie's
that was
not done.
on the
Go
so-called
ahead,
cheat
Jackie.
sheet was
Jackie,
not
your
similar
colleague-
to the
your-
question that was asked at the
Your
press
colleague
conference.
is not done. Go ahead. Go ahead.
It's a very reasonable question.
No,
I'm
but
asking.
I
It's
hear
a
you.
very
Can
reasonable-
you wait your turn? Thank you. Thank you, John. I appreciate that. I really do. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Go ahead, John.
And just to be clear, to people, skeptics who saw the card and saw the question number 1 and might think that that is a signal that it was pre-organized. Did the president have other questions that he was prepared, had similar talking points in case he was asked something on other topics in that same?
Jackie, I'm going to be, as someone who is part of his, of the prep briefing with the president for these press conferences, as his press secretary, we talk about an array of topics that could potentially come up. And that's what we do. Just at the end, there was shouted questions, and he took those shouted questions. But we also had a sense that, hey, you might get something on a debt ceiling, which makes a lot of sense, which is one of the news of the day. So we cover an array of topics. It's not just the 2 Americans who asked questions. It was also the 2 South Korean reporters who asked questions. So we do our best to make sure that the president is ready to communicate with all of you and the American people. So yeah, we covered an array of issues. But of course, there are probably the top 3, top 5 topics, hot items that you all are interested in, and so that's kind of how we move forward.
And the last one, just on that shouted question that he did respond to on the debt ceiling, having heard your response to questions that were answered already here today, you've had now Democrats saying that Republicans have come to the table, might not like what they came to the table with, but it's time for the dialogue. How long can this posture from the president last before it feels like intellectually dishonest to say, they're holding the economy hostage and not raising the debt ceiling when they did pass a bill to raise the debt ceiling, and the argument's really about the budget cuts, the spending cuts, and not about whether or not the debt ceiling gets raised?
So I have to say, Jackie, I disagree with the intellectually dishonest. That is certainly not how we see ourselves here, because we've been very, very clear that they need to deal with the debt ceiling. They need to not default. It is a constitutional duty. And again, this is not to us. This is to the American people. If you think
without conditions, unless it's a clean bill, they won't.
I've been very clear. Without conditions, we will not negotiate. There's nothing new there. What you're seeing that the House Republicans have done is they said that unless the president, and I've said this before, this is nothing new that I'm about to say, unless the president and the Senate agree to an extreme MAGA wish list, slashing education, veterans health care, Meals on Wheels, taking away health care from millions of Americans, and sending manufacturing jobs overseas, they're going to default and crash the economy. We've said this over and over and over again and been very clear. The president does not agree with this bill. He believes, and we believe, and the American people deserve this, that they need to do their constitutional duty. They need to do this so that they are not holding the economy, our American economy, hostage. We cannot be a deadbeat nation. We cannot be.
No meeting unless it's a clean debt bill.
Look, we've been very clear about this. We've been very, very clear. I appreciate the question. Oh, okay. Let me just take a question from the back. Well, I just took a bunch of questions on this. I want.
You literally just told me you would come back to it.
Yeah, you also
But you
screamed.
literally just told me.
I said, wait your turn, but now we're running out of time. Go ahead, Ed.
So
Go ahead, Ed.
So
Go ahead,
I
Ed.
wanted to ask you about the Inflation Reduction Act. The Penn-Wharton budget model just came out, which I realize you probably haven't seen, but it released new cost estimates, previously saying that it would cost $385 billion over 10 years. The new estimate, based on implementation details for the climate provision, is now more than $1 trillion over 10 years. Is government spending a concern for this president?
So look, the higher score reflects, and I did see this report, the higher score reflects that the Joint Committee on Taxation assumption that the Inflation Reduction Act will spur more manufacturing projects and more clean energy deployment than when JCT originally scored the bill. That is a good thing. It means more private sector investments, more American manufacturing, more jobs, more secure supply chains, and lower costs for American families thanks to cutting-edge technologies. Even with the new score, the Inflation Reduction Act still reduces the deficit over the long run, as you know, I know you follow this very closely outside of the 10 years, right? Because it looks at it in a decade. The Inflation Reduction Act increasingly reduces the deficit as time passes, including that second decade, as I was just mentioning, and beyond. So moreover, a number of experts have said that the CBO likely underestimated the deficit reduction from the Inflation Reduction Act's crackdown on rich tax cheats. An expert from the Treasury Department, 2 former IRS commissioners, and Treasury Secretary say the law's provision to make the wealthy pay what they already owe will reduce the deficit by more, even hundreds of billions more than CBO estimates. I will take one last question in the back. I'm going to go way in the back. Okay, right, way in the back, way in the back.
Thank you, Karine. 2 national security related questions. Is there going to be any planning or at least discussion of changing the structure of intelligence that came in post 9/11 with the CIA and the Defense Intelligence Agency in light of the recent leaks that have come out?
Well,
is that under discussion?
Yeah, no, totally understand the question. As I said many times before, my colleagues at NSC have said many times before, it is under the Department of Justice. It is investigation ongoing. Just not going to get ahead of that. Clearly, there was some announcement made from the Department of Defense, so I'm just going to leave it there. Just don't want to get ahead of any of that.
And in Sudan, there is more and more reports coming out about the ties of warlord Hemeti, the insurgent, to Russia, and particularly his own connection to the gold that's in Khartoum. Would the U.S. recognize him if he came to power and wins the ongoing civil war?
So look, we've been very clear about our concerns and how we want to continue to see the ceasefire occur. As you know, it was set for 72 hours on April 24th. We've been very clear on how we think that should move forward. I'm just not going to get ahead or speak to hypotheticals.